Hi, everyone. I have the very wonderful Christof with us this evening, and he's here to do an Ask Me Anything about schema therapy with children and adolescents. Christof is a doctor of clinical psychology, and he works as a clinical psychologist, and he is really behind the model of schema therapy for children and adolescents. And Christof very kindly shared his resume with me when I was looking at information put together. And it was so interesting, Christof, because I saw that around 2010 is when you started to really teach and train and develop the model. And when I was thinking about the question that I would ask, I remembered speaking to a colleague in 2010 because I was working in a private practice. And she said, Nadine, do you think I could use schema therapy for this young person, but they're only 16? And I said, because they had all these personality traits and things, but our training in clinical psychology in Australia at the time was saying that's too young to say that someone has a personality disorder. And so then we thought, well, should we really use schema therapy? And obviously that's a long time ago, and schema therapy has developed since then. But I thought, it's quite a coincidence, really, that it was at that time that, and I started to think, for that young person, schema therapy would have been perfect. So it was just, interesting to see that that's when you really started to build this. So I don't know if you wanted to say anything before I started with the questions, but you're very welcome.
Thank you, first of all, Nadine. Great honor to speak to you. And I'm really happy to receive the questions. So the point that you mentioned is when can we start with schema therapy is actually one which accompanied or which occupied me as well, because I was trained in schema therapy for individual adult. And as I am a clinical psychologist and therapist for children, I always wondered, why is it not possible to treat children and adolescents? We worked out and we have a program from 4 years and older. So of course it depends on the age. But of course, we can start earlier, and we don't treat personality disorders because the children are still in development. But we have, of course, let's say ADHD or depressive or any emotional dysregulation. And yes, we can use schema therapy pretty well here. And so far, yes, it is possible. And I think we will have some questions where I can
outline. And I did show you a lovely slide before we begin, and somehow it disappeared off my screen. So at some point I'm going to show everyone the book that you've put together with a couple of other contributors. But I believe that is a wonderful book and a good resource to sort of start looking at schema therapy for children and adolescents. And at the end, there are some questions about the training options. So I'll get you to speak more about that then. But perhaps for now, I'll start with one of the questions. And while you're answering it, I'll try and find this slideshow that's hiding somewhere on my computer. So the first question that I received was from Amy, or the first question I'm putting to you anyway. And the question is, what is the role of the parent in schema therapy for children? Are parents involved in the therapy room, or is it mainly child-focused?
So it depends on the age of the client. The younger the client, the more parent work is necessary from our point of view. So usually we ask, or we try to involve the parents more than usually in CBT. But if we have an adolescent or young adult, we focus a lot on the adolescent actually, without paying too much attention to the parents. But let's say till 14, 15, the parent is really, really important. It's the main caregiver. And we have separate sessions in the beginning for the child and for the parent. So the goal is that everyone learns what are my needs, what are my emotional buttons, and what are my modes, how I can cope with a difficult situation. This is valid for the child, for the client, but also for the parent. because they are sitting in one boat and they have to clarify for themselves first what they need before they go into the interaction. So yeah, parents are very important, but if the client is 15, 16 or older, we are very sensitive and usually not so much involving parents.
So in that way, it's similar to CBT and other models of therapies, just meeting the needs for individuation of the young person. And
it is similar, but nevertheless, we pay more attention to the parent side when we work with the client. So because we want to train them to understand their own needs, their schemas, their modes, and also emotionally to get to understand emotionally what is important here for me. So this takes more time actually for parents to learn that.
Yes. So it actually sounds like the parent role is stronger, and that you're considering the parent modes and the child modes, and probably my comparison to CBT wasn't very helpful there, but I just meant in terms of considering the age of the child. But the model itself is quite different, right, from what I understand anyway.
So the comparison is perfect, actually, because we understand schema therapy as an enhancement of CBT, but we see so much need on the parent side. They are puzzled, they don't know, they are powerless. So they have many questions, and they are triggered by the dysfunctional behavior of the children. And so far, the comparison CBT is really good, but we put more emphasis to support the parent.
Okay, great. And it probably fits nicely with the next question from Ricky, which was, do you integrate attachment work into schema therapy?
Actually, the whole work, the schema therapy, is attachment work, because one of the main agent, or maybe the main agent in schema therapy, is a relationship. So we try to rectify, let's say, inconvenient relationship experience in the therapy room. So the therapist is a model, but of course not a substitution for the parent. But we try actually to focus a lot on attachment issues to the child, but also to the parent, because we want to actually to support the parent to reparent their own children, so that we are not the therapist is the reparenting main force. The therapist is actually the one who helps the real parent to understand the needs of their children, so that they can reparent themselves actually as real parents.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense to me. And it makes it long term a more protective environment for the child, doesn't it? If the therapist helps to support the parent to rectify some of their schema triggering and modes that activate with their child. I think that was, for me, I stopped working with children, and part of it was I found all of that just very, very difficult, that particularly if a parent won't do the work with you, essentially sometimes it's not safe enough to work with the child. So yes, I know Ricky actually, and I think maybe what she was, she's just quickly messaged this to me before you came on.
Let me know.
I think she actually means, are you working with the parent and the child attachment? And through your explanation, I think you're saying, yes, you are. And so you don't try and supplement that attachment between the child, as yourself. Like, you're really trying to improve that parent-child relationship through this work.
So the ultimate goal is actually to bring child and parent together and make them understand first, what do I need, but what is also the need of the family or the system where I live in. So we understand ourselves as a lawyer for the needs. The child has needs, but also the parent has needs. And we work with them, we start with them separately, but in the end, we bring them together. Then we look for the family needs. What does everyone need to feel well? And that the child is important, but the parent as well. And it is tricky sometimes when the parent is not open for that. They try to bring, like a car, please fix my child, and when can I pick him up again, or when you're ready. So this is something where that's sometimes tricky to get parents open for that idea that they also a part of the system, which is really relevant to look on.
Yeah, sure. And Melissa has asked, and if a parent is not available to reparent, so I think Melissa might know your model a little bit better than some of the other people, is there another way this can be done?
Yes, actually, we are looking for the needs, and usually the biological parents or the main caregivers we try to support. But if they are not available because they don't want, or they are, I don't know, sitting in a prison, or they passed away, or for some reason they are not available, of course that happens, but then we think who else could do the job to meet the needs of the child. So it's not so much important that the biological parents do the job, but someone needs to do that. This is our basic attitude, that if the parents are not available, who else could take care of the emotional needs of the child? And that, then we look who else from a natural environment or the family could do the job.
And that might be a foster carer or something like that.
Yes, that's also possible. Yes, sure.
Yeah. Sure. Okay. And the next question is from Catherine, and she says, I'm curious about applying the model when working with a teenager who is living with an emotionally depriving and invalidating parents. So a little bit like you and I were just discussing. Where the adolescent's efforts to connect with that parent are not being reciprocated, could the model be adapted when the need is currently not being met? But I think you're saying you work very hard to try and encourage the parent to learn how to meet the need.
Well, we have to check. We have to check what do you need and what is possible. So here is also a lot of acceptance and commitment. So if the parent is not available emotionally, it wouldn't be wise to try. It's a big frustration story. So we have to check what is your parent able to actually to understand or to give you. And if it is not possible, then we have to clearly understand that is not possible. So let's try to find any kind of substitute or compromise. Where else could you find this, what you actually wish from the parents?
Sure.
So in a way, it is very sad, but it is as it is, and we have to face a reality. And if the parent is not available, then at a certain point, we try to accept that and look for the next best solution.
Yes. And so I think what you're saying to Catherine is we're not going to set up the child to fail and to continue to be traumatized by this dismissive or abusive parent. And so, of course, then the model gets adapted to how best can the child's needs be met. And, as you said, it's sad. I think it's the minority of children that we probably see in practice, depending on your setting, but certainly in private practice. But it's not unheard of to have this, this sort of a parent.
But it is often the case that maybe not this extreme forms where parents are not available at all, but it is often the case that clients wish to have something. What we have to find out, is that realistic? And of course they have the basic emotional needs, and these are really holy to us. But we try to figure out what is realistic, because we need one thing, and that is success. The child needs success. And if we accompany the child, then we are really looking where do we have good chances to be successful, so that the child has positive experience while doing something, while is motivated. So that is really important, that we are not blind running to any goal where we don't have good chances to reach this goal.
Yeah, I really love that, actually, that you talk about success, and that we need to find a way to get success for the child. So it isn't going to be to encourage a fantasy of something that isn't possible, or that will end up hurting the child more. Although, you know, as someone who works with adults all the time, I see that fantasy parent and going back for more when you're never going to get is something we're still working with there. So perhaps we can't fully solve that problem, but yeah, I really like how you phrased that. And the other thing that I've said that I thought was fantastic was being a lawyer for the needs. I think that's a really great term, actually. It's a good way of thinking about it, kind of brokering and
Of course, we are there. We are in favor of the child needs, but it is not very wise to think only of the child, because we need the caregivers. If the caregivers are not satisfied with the idea or was a model we have actually worked out, and it breaks down and we have the same misery as before, maybe even worse. So this stance makes it possible that we work with children but also with parents, because again we are lawyers of the needs. And
that's great. It's a great term. I think I could use that in my work with adults too. Sometimes I have to work with all these systems and, you know, not always going to be able to get what the client wants. So it's a good one. Sarah asks, how do you assess the schemas and modes in children and adolescents? Is there an SMI, the inventory or the like available to give parents to report on their child?
There's an SMI just developed. It is a colleague of mine in Hamburg, Peter Graf, but it is not published, it's not translated. So actually, no, we don't have an inventory for the modes, schema modes, but there's an inventory for the schema disposition, we say actually, for children, because they are still growing and in development. So I have developed one with a work group in Düsseldorf University. It's actually free. If people are interested, I can send it to them. It's for 8 to 14-year-old children.
Is it in German at the moment?
It's in English. It's in many languages meanwhile, but it was translated by Ruth Holt, which is maybe known to many people in Australia. So Ruth from Canberra.
Oh, Ruth, yes. Yes, so we know Ruth. Yeah,
she helped a lot and also translated the question.
Yeah, I haven't actually seen that one around, so I'll have to dig that up just for my benefit.
Sorry. So actually, we try to pick out the schemas, and by asking the client, what is the worst situation that you are faced with? And in day-to-day life. So what is really, where could you explode? So then they could say maybe peers call me names or injustice or anything. So we are curious about the trigger, and then we ask them, what is the first thing, what comes into your mind? And for example, no one likes me, or I'm a loser, or I'm stupid, or whatever, get the short end of the stick, or and so on. So, and this is a way how we call the schema. If the client would say, when somebody criticizes me, I think I'm not lovable, or I'm a loser, then we call the schema, I'm a loser schema, or we have this metaphor of glasses. So we try to use them glasses and tell them, then you have the no one likes me glasses. So this is a very simple way how we try to get into the wording of our young clients and call the schema according to what they tell us. And this is actually the easiest way to find a schema. We ask them for over-response. Where do you over-respond to difficult situation? And this is the practitioner way to work out what kind of wound or emotional button or schema do they have.
Yeah, great. That's great. Okay, thank you for answering that. So Angelica's got a question. Could you please share one creative tool as an example that works great with children and can also help adults or parents? I can't wait to read your book, she says. I heard great recommendations. So
actually we have our different phases in schema therapy. So we start with a relationship building and work a lot on resources.
Mm-hmm.
The next phase is that we try to find an explanation model. How comes that I experience this, or I'm so sensitive to certain things? So we try to create a mode sketch first. So this is a figure, a big figure, where small figures are inside. I don't know if you have seen that before. So we try to conceptualize the different states or modes.
Mm-hmm.
And this is actually where we start with, for children 6 years and older. And for example, when we work with primary school children, we work with finger puppets, or if we work with teenager, we have, for example, mode cards, but
Mm-hmm.
any kind of visualization. So we bring outside what's inside.
Right.
And then we look actually with a client together, which is our co-expert. It's not the patient, it's not the client, it's actually our co-expert. We look at what's going on here on the table, on the,
mm-hmm.
with the finger puppets or the cards. Could you help me to explain, to understand what's going on? And then we externalize certain states or modes, and then we look together on what is going on with the finger puppets or mode cards. And that helps a lot actually for the children or teenager, that they are not in the focus on, on the vision of the psychologist. And so we both experts talk about the phenomenon, yes, what we detect on the table or play carpet, right, or whatever.
It's almost like sitting parallel rather than across as well. Is that
exactly?
Yeah, lovely.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So the child is a co-expert. He is not the one with a problem, but he knows a lot about the problem. We are playing on the table. And that's actually a nice way where the child is safe. It's not so pushy and doesn't feel actually so much push to talk now about my own feelings. And so it's easier to say, this puppet is sad. It's much easier than to say, I am sad. So, and when we ask, what does a sad mode need, then we can talk about, I think he needs this, or what do you think? So it's nice to work on these two levels, expert level, but also go into the play, and then we play.
Yeah.
It's quite nice, and it's
that
funny also
good.
for the therapist.
Yeah. Daniela asks, I won't go into the there's quite a few parts to her question. You kind of covered some of it, but does experiential work with kids look very different to that with adults?
Well, we try to play a lot. Actually, I don't know if you're working with children or teenager, there's a rule in CBT, do work, let's say, from 50 minutes, work 40 minutes, and then play 10 minutes. As a reinforcement of first the work, then the fun, so to speak. I don't know. But actually we want to work, we want to play the whole time, 50 minutes. So actually the best therapy is when the child does not notice how we are working on the modes, or we are working out difficult situation. And in so far we intend to involve the child's problem or the needs or the modes into the play, what we are playing actually. And so
yes, so in that way
more,
everything that's experiential is really going to look more like play, and not so much how we would set it up with an adult, where we might say, okay, now we're going to do this exercise or float back on this. So it will be quite different by the sound of it.
So this is for the primary school children. For teenagers, they are in between. It might be more playfully, but it might be also more aware, mindfulness also. So they are in between children and adults. And
that's right.
But in general, we try more to play. Yes, that's true.
Yes. So I think Daniela might be sort of thinking about something like imagery rescripting, and whether you might do that with a primary school age child, or whether that wouldn't be as suitable.
Yeah, in a certain way. So in general, we think the parents are responsible for the child, for the children. So the children have a right actually to have a caregiver who takes care of them. So if a child has suffered from certain need frustration, in general, the caregiver is the first address to take care of the child. But of course, we work, let's say, also with adolescents or teenager who has had bad experience in the past, for example, bullying situation in the classroom. So here we can do imagery with scripting. We go straight into the scene, or we use the inner house. The inner house means that we actually building up a three-dimensional house. I think you had a picture.
Yeah, I'll put it up. Actually, I found the presentation. I think I can show it because I had the photo. Just give me 1 second. Oh, no, it's not going on. Okay. Yes. So yes, this is it. So everyone can see the 3-layered house.
Yeah, exactly. So there are 3 layers. On the top is the modes, represents for the modes. And then we try to understand on the bottom level, where do you know these modes from? So this is the experience level. And in between is the schema level. This is actually some symbols that represent or abstract this experience, what has been played on the experience level. So what we have is a golden thread. We can look how's the mode connected to my patterns and how are the patterns connected to my experience. And that's actually quite nice to visualize how does a mode model is connected to the schema model, and that was my own personal experience. And that's actually quite nice to work that out. It looks complicated, but it is actually not so difficult. But
yeah, so I was actually, this was my 3-dimensional house, I guess, that I did in a peer supervision group, because Ricky, who asked a question before, she'd been to your training and she wanted to show us this thing.
Okay. So
and it made me quite sad that I was no longer working with children and adolescents, because I very much enjoyed building these 3 layers. And I think when you were talking about being co-experts and looking in, I could definitely see how that would work. And I think what interested me that I thought is not always there in adult schema therapy was those little stones that are if I remember correctly, the child's positive qualities or schemas. So
we also integrate positive schemas where we look for positive experience. So we really foster to uncover this positive experience or moments, these little moments of bright or sunny, or let's say the star moments in the memory. So we try to uncover them and build positive schemas. And how does a positive schema enrich my mode model, or gives me power to activate this mode or in general, to have more freedom on the mode level and to choose what is the best and which one is
Yeah. So it's really nice. About how long do you think, I mean, I'm sure it's different with all children, but is that something you would do repeatedly across sessions, or is it a bit of a one-off thing that then you refer back to?
Well, you mean the whole therapy process? How long?
No, that 3 house. Yeah.
Actually, we used to work on the top level actually anyway, because we are doing a mode sketch and we're finding some material for the modes and try to find out the inner mode dynamic. So how they are related to each other. So this is actually standard. And when we also do mode interviews, so we ask the puppets, or we place them on chairs and ask the child, could you sit on the chair and answer for the mode? So if we want to more visualize actually how's that connected to my own personal experience, and when did it start in my life to become so powerful or important to me, then it's actually, then we lift up the mode level and we look into the depths, actually to the deeper layers. So actually it is in one session possible. If we work out the mode model as well, then we need a double session for this exercise.
Yes.
But actually you can do it if you're prepared, if the mode model has been worked out, you can do the layers below in one 50-minute session.
Right. Okay. Yeah. No. So it was very interesting to do. Personally, I found so.
Yeah.
And I really love anything where you can use objects or symbols for clients, and I think this is just a really creative, lovely way. And I can imagine children liking stacking up those little layers too. It really brings that play element into it.
Yeah.
Now, I have just put in the Facebook group under the video that if people want to ask questions live, to do that now, because we've only got a few more left, which I will read out the next one. So the other part of Daniela's question was, have young clients who came for schema therapy with you returned later on in life or checked back in, and what did you notice about the impact of schema therapy on their adult life?
Difficult question, because we actually practicing, let's say, since 10 years about schema therapy, and honestly speaking, I do not know actually how they further develop. That would be really interesting to follow up. But we try to give them as much as possible a visual path on pictures, on recreate some material, what they can recall later on. But actually, I cannot. Personally, I believe, yes, it is helpful.
It's probably too soon, I think. It's too soon to have that data, isn't it? They're not really old enough yet. But also I think that sometimes even when we do really effective therapy with children, they will need some more tune-ups as adults, because often the circumstances of their childhood have been so challenging. So it's not necessarily a failing of the therapy. And the other thing I was thinking, often when people check back with us is because things aren't going well. So you're not always getting the positive feedback. I know sometimes I've been in my private practice for nearly 10 years now, and I'll get feedback from people I didn't even know I knew, a client saying, oh, so-and-so knows you, and she said she's doing really well now because of you. But I would normally never hear that, because the people that come back are those who've had a relapse or whatever. But yeah, I mean, I think the long-term impact of this model with children would be fantastic to look at down the track, actually, when there's longer term.
Actually, the challenges are changing actually in life. So we all have developmental or challenges all our life. So I wouldn't say even it's a relapse. It is actually a new task where I have to apply what I have learned now on the new situation. And in so far, it is actually a positive thing when they come back and try to apply now that for, let's say, challenges which were not present some time before. But
that's probably a very much more positive way than I have framed that. So thank you for that.
This is a way
that'll help me next time someone comes back when I think that the job's been done. So yeah, that's very good, a new task. And actually, one thing that I do think is if someone comes back to you, then something very good has happened where they trust you for this next phase. So yeah.
Yeah, that happens sometimes. When teenager, let's say with 13, 14, are not prepared, maybe they are forced by the parents to come into my office and they have a lot of resistance and so on. And of course, I cannot force someone to go on. And if there are some resistance, but some come back and then it's even more valuable, or that they know, I know someone that was okay, or
absolutely, I think that's really very important, and especially for some of the people that we're working with, there's very few people they trust, so it's a really good sign. I'm just quickly checking these questions on Facebook. Beta has asked, if you're doing a bullying rescript and then the child, actually this might be more really, Beta, I think this is more probably like a supervision question, so I won't ask this one. Sorry about that. I did promise the presenters that I wouldn't present specific case things. But perhaps we could say that more generally. I guess I think this comes up for imagery rescripting questions anyway, but sometimes the child or the adult in the rescript wants to kill or seriously injure the perpetrator or the parent. And personally, I find different therapist trainers have views on this, but what's your view about should we allow that to and rescript that way, or should we look for a less violent option?
Yeah. Actually, I want to help the vulnerable child in the rescripting. And when somebody tells me, come on, chop off his head or kill him, shoot him. So I would think, who's talking actually, or which mode is. So I would actually conclude this is probably the angry, enraged, or any kind of mode which is full of hatred and wants to take revenge. And I would say, no, actually, I'm not here for that. I really would love to protect you and to find a good way. And then we think together what we do with him. We can we can shoot him to the moon, or we lock him up or whatever, but I'm not open for killing or for any whatever, shooting or so I wouldn't join this. I would accept, yes, he needs to be locked up, he needs to far away, and then we take our time and look what would be good for him. It is an important question when teenagers come up, let's say with a parent and wants to kill the parent. If you join the teenager to kill the parent and say, yeah, it's just imagery, and the next 10 minutes, the parent is standing in the door, can I pick up my child? You have a real problem. Besides that, so it is also for practical reasons that we are actually not joining any violent way. The main thing is safety, validation, and protection of the vulnerable child.
Yes,
this is actually my position, and so far I try to explain that I'm not a partner in any killing procedure.
Thank you. And I think that makes a lot of sense, especially for this population, so the children and adolescents, that we're in a way helping guide them to make alternative decisions. And we can be sort of quite polarized in our society. It's either punish or nothing, so you're providing a range of options in there, so that's good. Okay, I realize you've been with us for 40 minutes, which is very generous, so I better get through these questions. So this question was, when working with children around 11 and 12, is it best to adapt chair work, for example, with a demanding critic? Would we interview that demanding critic, or is it more effective to still interview the demanding critic and healthy adult inner leader parts together and switch between them? I'm not quite sure exactly what that means, but I did pick up that when you're doing chair work, it's sort of puppets and placing things. So perhaps you could sort of talk about how you might work with a critic mode with chairs and children.
Actually, with puppets, it's possible. It depends on the developmental stage of the child. So the 12-year-old can be like an 8-year-old. Then we would prefer actually the puppet work. But usually 12-year-old, we get on the chair. So 10 years and older, they are capable actually to move on the chair and to shift into the role of this mode. And let's say we have an inner critic. So the 12-year-old would say, I'm so ugly, I'm so stupid, I'm so bad, and no one likes me for good reasons because I'm really bad. So we listen to the inner critic or punitive mode, and of course we can work with it. It makes sense to also be open for the parents' messages, for the real parent. So what is their stand, or how can they support their child to stop or to in some way to modify these messages? Of course, it's not stupid and so on. But with a 12-year-old, we can do a lot of work actually to disempower this these voices or these thoughts, and we would do that at any rate. And by the way, often the peers are more important than the parents in this age. So if we have a 12, 13 year or teenager, it's for the children, often the parents would say, I love you, you're beautiful, and you're not too fat now. And actually the peer group is a problem. So it is more fair actually to talk about the inner critic or punitive mode instead of parental critic, because the parents are not always the source of the messages.
I actually think that's sort of shifting a bit in schema therapy. There's more recognition that critics can come from a range of sources. And actually, a while ago, I read a really interesting article that some children are not very affected by their parents at all and very affected by peers. Some are affected by peer and parent, and some only parent, not peer. So that's what we're always looking for, is what sort of a young person, if we got, or even, you know, when you're working with adults, and not just assume that everything has come from the parent in terms of that. I'm just wondering actually what you call the healthy adult mode in children.
Oh, we call it clever and wise mode, because as you probably assume, the child is not an adult, and it would be inappropriate to call him healthy adult. So we have good experience with clever and wise mode, or wise mode, which implies as cleverness, okay, but also wisdom, actually, and that's the point. It's not only a solution producer, it is also self-compassion, a big topic, and that for that reason we don't need the solution-oriented thinking, but we need first self-compassion. So
that's great.
Usually is a clever, wise message.
And I'll just ask one more question from the chat here. But if you have a narcissistic parent and who blames the child for that broken relationship, do you have any tips for how to work with that parent system?
Actually, I want to help the child. And for me, it's clear if the parent is struggling with his self-esteem or doesn't find a good way, an adequate way, actually, which has an impact on the child's development or child's own feeling or self-esteem, I would very sensitive and in a very friendly, welcome way invite the parent and try to talk about needs and talk about difficulties to meet the needs for the child, but also for themselves. And I would try actually to encourage him to find a therapist or a coach, let's call it a coach for himself, to tackle this difficulty of being a parent. So without blaming him, you make your child sick with your narcissistic features. I would say it is extremely difficult to raise children because they demand everything from us. So we are often overwhelmed. Even schema therapists are overwhelmed when they are mother or father. So this is real life. So children are very intelligent. They push all buttons, and they will find the emotional buttons of their parents. That's a normal thing, no matter what you have learned or where you're an expert in. And that is, I would invite the parent. It's not a shame, or it's not a. It doesn't mean you are to blame for what is going on, but it's extremely challenging to find a good way when children are checking or testing all kind of buttons. So you
sort of recognize that the child is pushing the buttons of the parent. So that might work a little bit with a narcissistic parent, but you don't allow the parent to completely blame the child. I mean, I think this is a very difficult sort of family system.
That's why I'm talking about needs. Actually, I want to inform him from an expert side, what do humans need to develop in a healthy way? And here we have the concept of the emotional needs. And one of the things is attachment and self-esteem. So everyone needs actually applause or anything like that, and not criticism. Criticism is, I mean, in the moment understandable, but it's not a healthy way for children to develop. And if they find themselves more criticizing than praising, then they have, I would encourage them to look on themselves. How do I feel, and what was my experience in my childhood? How did my parents manage me actually, and what is in the back of my mind.
Yeah.
So I try with angel's tongue. I don't know if this is a German expression. So with very warm, empathic, I try to bring him to a therapist on his own.
Yeah, it's lovely. And Melissa, I think she knows your training. She says, do you have a copy of the screening tool that doesn't have so many pages for printing purposes? I'm not quite sure what screening tool she's meaning, but
we have one screening for teenager, 14 till 18. I can send it to colleagues who are interested, so contact me. So it's not evaluated, it's really a screening from clinical experience, but it might be a door opener to get an idea of what it might be or where are the difficulties.
Okay, but there's only one version with the same amount of pages by the sound of it.
Yeah, actually 2 pages.
Two? I'm not sure. I'll have to check. I know Melissa too, so I'll ask her later. So anyway, I'm just going to put up while we finish up just an image of your book for those who are interested in learning a bit more about schema therapy for children and adolescents. And the final 2 questions were really about that, Christof. So there was 2 people who asked, what is the training or accreditation process for therapists interested in schema therapy for children and adolescents?
So if you're interested in schema therapy for children, I would actually suggest or recommend to have a workshop number 1, which we have altogether 4 workshops, and each workshop is 2 days. So altogether 64 teaching units. 8 days with 8 teaching units per day. And this is actually the basic training where we cover the dyadic and didactic content or hours actually. And yeah, there are different institutes who offer that. So for example, in Singapore, I start soon in the summer. So it's actually Perth time zone, I think.
Will that be online or face-to-face?
Yes, online. It will be online.
Okay.
Complete online course.
Yes, so Singapore is a great time zone for Australians, that's for sure.
Yeah. We also have in Cologne, or I have it in different other places, a webinar. So the whole series is online. Next year, I'm probably also in Australia. I'm just going to in contact with Chris Hayes to offer schema therapy for adolescents and young adults, workshop in person then, of course. So how's the process? This is actually a track on itself. So if you're already trained in schema therapy for individual adults, that's great and a perfect starting point actually, but it is actually for children and adolescents, it's a track on its own. So you can use of course, knowledge.
Could people begin with schema therapy for children and adolescents? Or would you recommend they do the adult model first?
No, they can come straight to the children and adolescent part.
Yeah, because here anyway, there's some people who just only work with children and adolescents. It's not going to make sense for them to do the adult pathway. But certainly that's the most popular and well-known version of schema therapy.
It makes sense to go straight into, because there are 2 equal tracks actually. Either you work with adults or children and adolescents. And so
so it's absolutely fine just to start with your training and go, if you want to accredit, go through the ISST with that, because I've just accredited and it's a very time intensive and expensive process. So I definitely don't think you'd want to do both, because that would just, you can if you want to, but
most people are happy with getting to know the techniques or approaches because you can also apply them for the adult clients.
Yes.
Because actually we want to reach, or we want to attract the child within the adult client. And why not using techniques which are for children? So it's actually also helpful for adult clients.
Yes. Also, I find that a lot of the therapy techniques or ways of explaining things to children. They're just so simple and accessible. So I have been known to adapt lots of things that I would use with children for adults, because I just think, let's not make therapy hard. And you don't want people in therapy feeling that they're too dumb for therapy, but it's also just sometimes more engaging too. And the final question, which is on that track too, is what stage of your career do you think you can begin training in schema therapy
well, usually
for children and adolescents? Because this is a person very new, say perhaps just out of university, who's asked the question.
Yeah, so actually it's for already trained psychotherapists. So it is additionally to what they have learned. So for example, if they trained in CBT, we used actually to work with colleagues who are already experienced therapists who have completed a training or close to completion. And then this comes additionally. So it's not a substitution for psychotherapy training. So we assume the participant has already experience and has the license to treat children and adolescents in their country. So
yes. And I'll just point out for anyone watching, in Australia, we do have a bit of a different pathway, that sometimes you don't have a master's degree and you're a psychotherapist. So if you do want to accredit with the ISST, you must have a minimum of a master's. But I think really a lot of people can get a lot out of your training without ever accrediting. And I certainly, Ricky, who I know in Australia, who did the demonstration with me, learnt a lot from that level 1 that she did with you. So that's just probably a place to start. And then if you are interested in accrediting, then using that as a stepping stone to there. But thank you so much for coming on live. You've given us so much of your time. And thank you to the people who were live with us and who submitted questions. It was a bit late for some people in Australia. And obviously, we've got all different time zones. I can't even lose count, over 60 different countries of nationalities in the group. So that means there's never a perfect time for everybody. But I know a lot of people said, is it recorded? Because I'd like to watch it. So it is just in the group there forever, pretty much, for people to watch. And look out for those upcoming dates of Christof's training, whether you're looking for a European time zone or an Australian time zone or Singaporean time zone. And I just really wanted to say thank you for being our very first Ask Me Anything and making it very easy for me, because I've never done one of these either.
Perfect. You have done it perfectly. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you so much.
And congratulations to this Facebook group. I was really, really impressed how quick you raised thousands of people. So I was really, wow, what's going on in Australia or somewhere else in the world? So congratulations.
Oh, thank you so much. And I just like to try and keep it a bit spontaneous and creative. And I think that's possibly what works about it. And it's just really great to see people being able to access schema therapy and get interested in it. And there's various degrees of interest in it. Some people are mad for it like me, and other people are just sort of seeing what it's about, comparing it to their therapy, and that's all good. But thank you for the feedback, and it's been my pleasure, and it was absolutely a surprise to me too. I thought there might be 150 people in there, but we're going to be 4,000 probably some point. And it's also thanks to people who are willing to do things like this. So thank you, Christof, and enjoy the rest of your day. I can see lovely sunshine there. I've got pitch black out here.
For me, and calls me, Christof, come. Yeah, I'm going out now.
Oh, lovely. Okay. All right. Thank you. And I'm just trying to get my mouse to work. I'll just stop the meeting here for Facebook. I don't know how to do that actually.